The red sun hung like a dying eye in the purple sky of Zelthia. Ambassador Velthor stood on the highest tower of the capital city, watching the last of his people hurry through the streets below. Their thin, graceful forms moved quickly between the white stone buildings that had stood for thousands of years. Soon, all of this would be gone. The star that had given life to his world for millions of years was growing larger each day. Scientists said they had maybe 6 months before it would expand enough to burn away their atmosphere. After that, nothing would remain of the Kethra civilization except memories and the desperate messages they had been sending into space. Velthor's pale blue skin felt hot even through the protective suit he wore. The radiation from their dying sun was getting stronger every day. His people, who had evolved under gentle starlight, could not survive much more of this. The children were getting sick first. The doctors did what they could, but there was no cure for a sun that wanted to kill you. He walked back into the communication center where dozens of Kethra worked at glowing panels. They had been sending the same message for 3 months now, broadcasting it to every known civilization in the galaxy. The message was simple. We are dying. Please help us. We'll give you anything. Any responses today? Velthor asked his aide Cathara. Her large dark eyes looked sad as she shook her head. The Zephyrian Empire sent another food shipment. They say they feel sorry for us, but they cannot send ships. The Crystalline Consortium offered to preserve our cultural records in their memory banks. The Void Traders want to negotiate for our biotechnology, but they will only take a few hundred of our best scientists. Velthor felt his heart sink. The same responses they had been getting for weeks. Everyone was sorry. Everyone wished they could help. No one would actually save them. The Kethra were not warriors. They had never built great fleets of warships or conquered other worlds. For thousands of years they had been peaceful farmers, scientists, and artists. Their greatest achievement was learning how to make plants grow in perfect harmony with their world. They had created medicines that could heal almost any disease and art that could make even enemies weep with beauty, but none of that mattered now. You could not fight a star with poetry. You could not negotiate with physics. Apparently you could not convince other species to risk their ships and resources to save people they barely knew. Show me the latest reports, Velthor said. Brought up displays showing their world from space. The star looked huge and angry, its surface bubbling with explosions that shot fire millions of miles into space. Their planet looked tiny and helpless next to it, like a small animal trying to hide from a forest fire. The atmospheric processors are failing, she reported. The ones on the day side cannot handle the heat anymore. We are losing breathable air faster than we can make it. The night side is still okay, but not for long. Velthor nodded. He had expected this. How many people do we have left? 40,200,000, she said. We moved everyone from the dayside cities last month. But the night side cannot support everyone for much longer. Food production is down 60%. Water recycling systems are breaking down from the heat stress. 40 million people. His entire species packed into the cooler half of a dying world, waiting for help that would probably never come. Velthor had read the responses from other civilizations. He understood what they were really saying. The Zephyrian Empire had ships, but they were busy with a war against the Hive Collective. They could not spare vessels for a rescue mission that would take months and might not succeed. The Crystalline Consortium lived in space habitats that were already overcrowded. Taking in 40 million refugees would strain their resources beyond breaking. The Void Traders saw the Kethra as customers, not people. They would save the useful ones and let the rest die. Even the Peaceful Harmony Alliance, which preached unity among all species, had sent only words of comfort and small amounts of medical supplies. When it came to actually saving lives, everyone had excuses. Sir, one of the communication officers called out, "We have a response from the Galactic Council." Velthor hurried over. The Galactic Council was made up of the oldest and most powerful civilizations. If anyone could organize a rescue operation, it would be them. The message appeared on the screen in the formal script used for official communications. Velthor read it twice, hoping he had misunderstood. But the meaning was clear. The Galactic Council extends its deepest sympathies to the Kethera people in this time of crisis. We recognize the tragedy of your situation and admire your courage in facing it. However, after careful consideration of the logistical challenges and resource requirements, we must conclude that a full evacuation of your population is not feasible within the available timeframe. We encourage you to prioritize the preservation of your cultural heritage and scientific knowledge for future generations. The Council stands ready to assist in documenting your civilization's contributions to galactic knowledge. Velthor stared at the message for a long time, then he turned away from the screen and walked to the great window that looked out over his dying world. They want to preserve our knowledge, he said quietly. They will remember us after we are gone. How generous. Cathara came to stand beside him. What do we do now? Velthar looked at the red sun, then at the city below where his people continued their daily lives, because there was nothing else they could do. Children still played in the parks. Artists still painted pictures. Farmers still tended their crops, even though everyone knew it was pointless. We keep sending the message, he said. Someone out there might hear us. Someone who thinks differently than the great powers of the galaxy. Someone who believes that 40 million lives are worth saving no matter what the cost. But sir, we have contacted everyone. Every known civilization, every space station, every colony world. Who else is there? Velthar touched the communication controls and adjusted their broadcast array to send the message even further into space, toward the unknown regions beyond the edge of mapped territory. It was a desperate act, like throwing a bottle into an ocean and hoping someone would find it. There are always unknowns, he said. Species we have never met, worlds we have never heard of. Maybe somewhere out there is someone who will hear our call and decide that the impossible is just difficult. He activated the long-range transmitters and sent their plea into the darkness between the stars. The same message they had been sending for months, but now aimed at regions of space where no known civilization lived. This is Ambassador Velthar of the Kethera people. Our star is dying. Our world will be uninhabitable in less than 6 months. We have 40 million people who need to be evacuated. We offer everything we have in exchange for help. Our knowledge, our technology, our service. We ask not as strangers, but as fellow beings who love life and do not wish to see it end. Please, if you can hear this, help us. Time is running out. Message raced away from Zelthia at the speed of light, carrying the hopes of a dying race into the unknown. Velthar watched the transmission indicators until they faded to nothing. Then he returned to his work, because there was nothing else to do but wait and hope that somewhere in the darkness someone was listening. Captain Jake Morrison floated in the command chair of the exploration ship U.S. Frontier, watching the stars drift past on the main screen. They had been traveling through uncharted space for 3 weeks now, further from Earth than any human had ever gone before. The mission was simple. Find new worlds, catalog interesting phenomena, see what was out there in the unknown regions of the galaxy. Jake was a tall man with brown hair and tired eyes who had spent most of his adult life in space. He had joined Earth's Space Exploration Service because he wanted to see what lay beyond the edge of human knowledge. Now, at 42 years old, he was finally getting his chance to explore the true frontier. Captain called communications. Officer Ben Harper from his station. I'm picking up something weird on the long-range sensors. Jake pushed himself over to Ben's workstation. Ben was a young man from Texas who had a gift for finding signals in the noise of deep space. If he said something was weird, it was worth investigating. What kind of weird? Jake asked. It's a transmission of some kind, but not like anything in our databases. The pattern is too regular to be natural, but it's not using any communication. Protocols I recognize. Ben adjusted his controls, and the signal became clearer. It's coming from about 60 light-years away, near that red giant system we marked on yesterday's survey. Dr. Alex Stone, the ship's xenobiologist, drifted over to join them. Alex was a woman in her 30s, with short black hair and the kind of intense curiosity that made her perfect for first-contact situations. Could it be artificial, like from an alien civilization? That's what I'm thinking, Ben said. The signal strength suggests it's being deliberately broadcast at high power. Someone really wants this message to be heard. Navigation specialist Lisa Carter looked up from her charts. Lisa was a quiet woman with blonde hair who could calculate hyperspace jumps in her head faster than most computers. Captain, that red, giant system. I've been analyzing the stellar data. That star is in the final stages of expansion. Any planets in that system are probably getting cooked right now. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. An artificial signal from a dying star system could only mean one thing. Ben, can you decode the transmission? Trying, sir. The computer is running pattern analysis now. Wait, I think I've got something. Ben's screen filled with symbols and mathematical relationships. It's definitely a language, but not one we've ever seen before. The AI is trying to find patterns we can translate. The ship's computer worked for several minutes, comparing the alien transmission to every known form of communication in human databases. Slowly, words began to appear on the screen as the translation program found mathematical and logical structures it could interpret. This is Ambassador Velthor of the Kethra people. Ben read aloud as the words appeared. Our star is dying. Our world will be uninhabitable in less than 6 months. We have 40 million people who need to be evacuated. The bridge fell silent. As the full message played out, Jake felt his chest tighten as he listened to the desperate plea of an entire alien civilization begging for help. 40 million people, facing death as their sun expanded to destroy their world. How far away did you say they were? Jake asked quietly. 61.7 light years, Lisa answered. At maximum hyperspace velocity, we could reach them in about 9 weeks. Alex shook her head. Even if we left right now, we couldn't evacuate 40 million people. The frontier has life support for maybe 300 at emergency capacity. The message is being broadcast in all directions, Ben reported. They're not just calling to us. They're calling to anyone who might be listening. Jake stared at the translation scrolling across the screen. The aliens were offering everything they had, their knowledge, their technology, their service, in exchange for help. It reminded him of stories his grandfather used to tell about people stranded on sinking ships, sending out distress calls, and hoping someone would hear them in time. Sir, Lisa said carefully, what are we going to do? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking the frontier was just one small exploration ship with a crew of 38. They were not equipped for rescue missions, especially not on this scale. But they were the only humans who had heard this call for help. Maybe they were the only ones who would hear it. Ben composed a response message. Tell them we received their transmission and that help is coming. Send it on the same frequency they're using. Sir? Ben looked confused. We can't evacuate 40 million people. We can't, Jake agreed. But Earth can. Lisa, plot a course back to human space. Maximum speed. Alex, prepare a complete report on everything we know about this situation. I want details on the stellar mechanics, the timeline, everything. As his crew rushed to carry out their orders, Jake activated the ship's long-range communications array and began recording a message to Earth Fleet Command. This is Captain Morrison of the UES Frontier, current position grid 77 Alpha. We have intercepted a distress call from an unknown alien civilization. Species designation, Kethra. Population, approximately 40 million. Situation, planetary evacuation required due to stellar expansion. Timeline, critical, less than 6 months remaining. Requesting immediate deployment of all available evacuation resources. Repeat, this is a Code 1 humanitarian emergency. Knowing that what he said next would probably end his career, Fleet Command did not like officers who made unauthorized first contact with alien species or committed Earth's resources without proper authority. I am transmitting our current position and heading back to Earth to provide detailed briefing. Recommend immediate consultation with Colonial Administration regarding emergency refugee protocols. These people are going to die if we don't help them. Morrison out. Jake sent the message toward Earth, knowing it would take 3 weeks to reach Fleet Command, and another 3 weeks for any response to come back. By then, they would either be heroes or court-martialed for exceeding their authority. Message sent to the aliens. Captain Ben reported. I told them help was coming and to hold on. Good. Jake strapped himself into his command chair as Lisa engaged the hyperspace drive. Take us home, Lisa. Maximum burn all the way. The stars outside shifted and blurred as the Frontier jumped into hyperspace, racing back toward human space. Jake stared at the swirling colors of hyperspace and thought about the message they had just sent. Somewhere behind them, 60 light years away, an entire alien civilization was counting down the days until their world became uninhabitable. They had probably given up hope of being rescued. Most of the galaxy had already written them off as acceptable casualties, but they had not met humans yet. Jake thought about Earth's history, about all the times his species had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to survive. Humans were good at doing things other people said couldn't be done. They had colonized worlds that everyone said were too dangerous to live on. They had built cities in space where experts said it was impossible. It survived wars, plagues, disasters, and extinctions that should have wiped them out. Maybe other species looked at 40 million refugees and saw an impossible logistical nightmare. Maybe they calculated the costs and decided it wasn't worth the risk. But humans had a different way of looking at problems. They didn't ask if something was possible. They asked how to make it possible. Dr. Stone came over and sat beside him. You think Earth will actually try to save them? Jake watched the colors of hyperspace flow past the windows. I think Earth will do what Earth always does when people are in trouble. We'll find a way to help, even if everyone says it can't be done. 40 million people, Jake. That's not like rescuing a few survivors from a crashed ship. It's an entire civilization. Yeah, Jake said quietly. And they asked us for help. Not the Galactic Council or some alien empire. They asked us. That means something. The Frontier raced through hyperspace toward Earth, carrying news that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Behind them, the Kethra waited on their dying world, hoping that the strange new voice that had answered their plea could somehow do what all the great powers of the galaxy said was impossible. Time was running out. But for the first time in months, the Kethra were not alone. Admiral Frank Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the red giant star grow larger on the main screen. Behind him, the largest fleet in human history followed in perfect formation. 300 ships of every size and type that Earth could spare, all racing toward a dying world to attempt the impossible. Frank was a heavy-set man with gray hair and steady hands, who had spent 30 years building Earth's space fleet. He had never imagined he would use it for something like this, and Captain Morrison's message had reached Earth 3 weeks ago. The politicians had argued for 2 days about whether to get involved. Then President Richard Stone had made the decision that changed everything. We're going, the president had said. All of them. Every ship we can find. Sir called Communications Officer Lieutenant Maria Santos from her station. We're receiving a signal from the planet. It's the same. Ambassador Velthor that Captain Morrison told us about. Put him on screen, Frank ordered. The main display showed a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. He looked exhausted and afraid, but there was hope in his voice when he spoke. Human ships. This is Ambassador Velthor. Received your message saying help was coming, but we did not dare believe it until now. You have brought so many vessels. Is this really possible? Frank stepped forward. Ambassador, this is Admiral Rodriguez of the Earth Fleet. We're here too. Get your people out. All of them. Sighs widened. All of them? But there are 40 million of us. Surely you cannot. Watch us, Frank said simply. Behind the Liberty came ships that no military planner had ever designed for evacuation work. The massive cargo hauler New York could carry 100,000 tons of freight, but her holds had been converted to house 50,000 refugees. The luxury liner Pacific Dream normally carried wealthy tourists between Earth and Mars. But today her staterooms were packed with emergency life support pods. Captain Tony Walsh commanded the mining vessel Deep Digger, which had been stripped of its industrial equipment and fitted with basic life support systems. Captain Kate Johnson brought the research ship Endeavor, its laboratories converted to medical bays. Even the old freight runners, like Captain Maria Santos, cargo ship Reliable, had been pressed into service. "Admiral," came a voice from the planet. "This is Commander Steve Adams of the Engineering Corps. My teams are on the surface working with the Kethra scientists. Their atmospheric processors are failing faster than expected. We have maybe 3 days before the air becomes toxic." Frank nodded. 3 days to evacuate 40 million people. It should have been impossible, but humans had gotten good at doing impossible things. "All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Begin. Operation Lifeline. I want every transport to start loading immediately. Cargo ships take priority areas near the spaceports. Passenger liners handle family groups and children. Medical ships get anyone who needs special care. The fleet scattered across the planet's night side like seeds on the wind." Frank watched from orbit as hundreds of shuttles and transport pods began ferrying people up from the surface. The Cathora moved quickly despite their weakness from radiation exposure, understanding that time was their enemy. Dr. Alex Stone had joined the fleet as the chief xenobiologist, and her reports were fascinating. The Kethra were a gentle species who had never known war. Their technology was built around healing and growing things, not destroying them. They had medicines that could cure diseases humans had never heard of, and agricultural techniques that could make desserts bloom. "Admiral," came another voice on the comm. "This is Colonel Amy Parker, evacuation coordinator. We have a problem. The Kethra children are getting sick faster than the adults. The radiation is affecting them more severely." "What do you need?" Frank asked. "Medical ships with better shielding. We need them now." Frank looked at his fleet roster. The heavy cruiser Washington had the best radiation shielding, but she was a warship, not a hospital ship. "Washington, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Convert your hangar bays to medical facilities immediately. You're now a hospital ship." "Sir, this is Captain Greg Turner of the Washington." "Are you sure? We'll have to remove most of our defensive systems." "Do it," Frank ordered. "Those kids need help." While the evacuation continued, human engineers worked alongside Kethra scientists to keep the planet livable for just a little longer. The atmospheric processors were ancient machines that had run perfectly for thousands of years, but they had never been designed to handle this level of solar radiation. Engineer Ryan Bell had an idea that was either brilliant or insane. "What if we don't try to fix the processors?" he suggested during a planning meeting. "What if we just boost their output for 3 days, then let them burn out completely?" Commander Adams looked skeptical. "That could work, but it might also cause them to explode." "Better than letting the atmosphere cook off naturally," Ryan said. "At least this way we control the timing." The plan was approved, and human and Kethra engineers began pushing the atmospheric processors beyond their design limits. It was like asking an old car engine to run twice as fast for 3 days straight. It might work, or it might blow up, but it was their only chance. Meanwhile, the evacuation continued around the clock. Captain Johnson of the Endeavour found herself ferrying Kethra scientists who insisted on bringing their research data with them. "This is the work of our entire civilization," one of them explained through the translator. "Without it, we are just refugees. With it, we can contribute to the galaxy." Dr. Linda Hayes, the fleet's chief medical officer, worked frantically to understand Kethera biology. The aliens needed different atmospheric mixtures than humans, and their children required special care. She had to modify life support systems. In real time, learning alien medicine by trial and error, while 40 million lives hung in the balance. Dr. Hayes called her assistant. "We're getting reports that some of the Kethra are refusing to leave. They want to stay with their world." Linda understood the feeling, but there was no time for sentiment. "Send counseling teams. Explain to them that their world will remember them better if they're alive to tell its story." On the planet's surface, the ancient cities of the Kethora began to empty. Buildings that had stood for thousands of years were abandoned as their inhabitants climbed aboard human shuttles. Some of the older Kethera wept as they left, touching the walls of their homes one last time, but the younger ones were excited. They had grown up hearing stories about the galaxy beyond their world, and now they were going to see it. The human ships seemed impossibly huge to them, and the human crews seemed impossibly determined. Ambassador Velthor found himself aboard the Liberty. working directly with Admiral Rodriguez to coordinate the evacuation. He had never seen anything like the human approach to logistics. Where other species would have formed committees and held planning meetings, the humans just started moving people and figured out the details as they went. Admiral Velthar said during a brief break in the chaos, "May I ask why your people are doing this? We have nothing to offer you that would justify this expense." Frank looked out at the dying star and the ships full of refugees. "Ambassador, where I come from, you don't leave people behind just because it's expensive or difficult. That's not who we are. But your government, your military leaders, they must have calculated the costs." "Well, they did," Frank smiled. President Stone's exact words were, "The cost of doing nothing is too high." Seems like he was right. As the second day of evacuation began, reports came in from across the galaxy. The great civilizations that had refused to help the Kethra were watching in amazement as the unknown humans accomplished what they had declared impossible, the Zephyrian Empire sent observer ships to witness the evacuation. The Galactic Council demanded to know who these newcomers were and by what authority they were acting. Frank's response was broadcast across the galaxy: "We act by the authority of common decency. Any other questions can wait until after we finish. Saving lives." The fleet continued its work, racing against time and physics to prove that 40 million lives were worth saving. The red giant star pulsed like an angry heart, sending waves of deadly radiation across the dying world of Zelthia. Captain Greg Turner watched the solar flare warning lights flash red across his ship's bridge as another burst of energy slammed into the Washington's shields. The modified hospital ship shuddered under the impact, but her crew kept working. Captain called Dr. Linda Hayes from the medical bay. "We have 3,000 Kethra children aboard, and more coming up from the surface. The radiation exposure is worse than we thought. Some of them won't survive much longer without treatment." Greg looked at his engineering display. The Washington shields were holding, but just barely. Each solar flare weakened them a little. More, they had maybe 12 hours before the shielding failed completely. After that, everyone aboard would start dying from radiation poisoning. "Doctor, how long do you need to stabilize the worst cases? At least 18 hours? Maybe more?" "Their biology is different from ours. I'm having to invent new treatments." As I go, Greg made the hardest decision of his military career. All power to medical bay and life support. Shut down shields. His first officer, Commander Nancy Clark, stared at him. "Sir, without shields, the radiation will kill us all." "Maybe," Greg said quietly, "but it will kill those kids first. We're adults who chose to be here. They're children who just want to live." The Washington's shields went down, and deadly radiation began pouring through the ship's hull. The human crew put on emergency radiation suits and kept working, knowing they were probably signing their own death warrants. But in the medical bay, Dr. Hayes and her team had the shielding they needed to save 3,000 young lives. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, engineer Ryan Bell was running out of time and options. The atmospheric processors were failing, faster than anyone had predicted. His plan to overload them was working, but it was also tearing them apart from the inside. Ryan called his assistant over the radio. "Processor Station 7 just exploded. We lost a quarter of the Nightside's air production." Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his calculations again. They had maybe 6 hours of breathable air left, but there were still 10 million Kethra waiting for evacuation. The math was simple and terrifying. There wasn't enough time. "Commander Adams," Ryan called on his communicator, "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." Here it came Adams' voice. "What if we vent atmosphere from the day side to the night side? The day side is already too hot for anyone to survive, but there's still breathable air there. You could pump it to where the people are. Ryan, the day side is over 200 degrees. Any pumping station would melt in minutes. Not if we use the mining robots. They're designed to work in extreme heat. We modify them to pump air instead of digging, or it was a crazy plan, but crazy was all they had left." Within hours, dozens of mining robots were racing across the burning day side of Zelthia, pumping precious air from the abandoned cities to the crowded night side, where millions of Kethra waited for rescue in space. Admiral Rodriguez watched, his fleet worked miracles of improvisation. The cargo ship Houston had taken on so many refugees that her floors were buckling under the weight. Captain Maria Santos reported that they had packed 50,000 Cathera into spaces designed for 30,000, but somehow everyone was still breathing. "Admiral," came a transmission from the luxury liner Golden Gate. "This is Captain Bill Hayes. We have a problem. Our life support systems weren't designed for Cathera biology. The air mixture is wrong, and some of our passengers are getting sick." Rodriguez checked his fleet roster. Golden Gate. "Transfer your passengers to the research ship Discovery. Dr. Stone has been working on atmospheric compatibility issues." "Sir, the Discovery is already full. Captain Johnson says she can't take any more without risking everyone." "Aboard, then we make room," Rodriguez said. "All command staff prepare to transfer to smaller ships. Give the Discovery our quarters." Across the fleet, human officers gave up their private cabins and moved into storage closets and maintenance areas. Admiral Rodriguez himself moved his command center to a converted cargo bay. If it meant saving more lives, they would sleep standing. Up, on the planet, Commander Nick Foster was attempting the most dangerous rescue mission of his career. His pilot skills were legendary throughout the Earth fleet, but this was beyond anything he had ever tried. A group of Cathera scientists had refused to leave their research station, which was now surrounded by toxic gases from a failing atmospheric processor. "Nick," came Dr. Stone's voice over the radio, "don't try it. The air down there will kill you in minutes, even with a suit." "Those people have been working for 30 years on a cure for a genetic disease that affects Cathora children," Nick replied as he guided his shuttle through the poisonous atmosphere. "If I don't get them out, that cure dies with them." Nick's shuttle was not designed for atmospheric flight in these conditions. The toxic gases were eating through his hull plating, and his engines were overheating. But he could see the research station below, the Cathera scientists waving desperately from the windows. The landing was more like a controlled crash. Nick's shuttle hit the ground hard, crushing her landing gear and cracking the cockpit window. But the cargo door still opened, and 6 Cathora scientists ran aboard clutching their research data. "Go, go, go!" one of them shouted in broken English. As toxic gas began pouring into the shuttle, Nick fired the engines and the damaged shuttle lurched into the sky, trailing smoke and sparks. The hull was failing, the engines were dying, but they made it to orbit. The cure for the genetic disease was saved, along with the scientists who had developed it. Ambassador Velthor spent these desperate hours moving between the human ships, helping to coordinate the evacuation and marveling at what he saw. The humans were not just saving his people, they were treating them like family. Human children shared their toys with Cathera youngsters. Human doctors worked themselves to exhaustion treating alien patients. Human engineers sacrificed their own safety to keep the rescue going. "Admiral Rodriguez," Velthor said during a brief meeting, "I must ask again. Why are your people doing this? You barely know us. We may have nothing to offer you in return." Rodriguez was exhausted, his uniform dirty, and his eyes red from lack of sleep. But he smiled when he answered. "Ambassador, my grandmother used to tell me a story. A man is walking by a river when he sees a child drowning. He jumps in and saves the child, even though he can't swim very well and nearly drowns himself. Someone asks him why he risked his life for a stranger's child. You know what he said?" Velthor shook his head, said because it was a child. "And children should not drown. That's why we're here, Ambassador. Because you are people, and people should not die when we can prevent it." As the third day began, the situation became desperate. Solar flares were increasing in frequency and intensity. The atmospheric processors were failing one by one. The air itself was becoming poison. But the humans kept working. Captain Tony Walsh brought his mining ship Deep Digger dangerously close to the planet's surface to pick up the last group of evacuees. The ship's hull glowed red-hot from atmospheric friction, but he held steady while 20,000 Cathera climbed aboard. Dr. Hayes worked without rest for 72 hours straight, inventing new medical procedures and modifying life support systems. Her innovations would later become standard practice for interspecies medicine. But at the time, she was just trying to keep people alive. The star grew brighter and angrier. Time was running out. But the humans had not given up, and neither had the Cathora. Together, they raced against the death of a world, proving that sometimes the impossible was just another word for difficult. The dying star of Zelthia gave one final massive pulse of energy that lit up the entire system like a supernova. Admiral Rodriguez watched from the Bridge of the Liberty as the red giant began its catastrophic expansion, reaching out with fingers of fire to claim the world that had orbited it for millions of years. "All ships report," he called into his communicator. "Houston clear with 51,000 aboard," came Captain Santos's voice. "Discovery clear with 42,000, reported Captain Johnson. "Washington clear with 38,000, said Captain Turner, his voice weak from radiation exposure but triumphant. One by one, the voices of 300 ship captains reported in. The impossible had been accomplished. 200,000 Cathura had been evacuated from their dying world. Not one had been left behind. Admiral called his navigation officer. "The planet's atmosphere is breaking apart. Zelthia has maybe 10 minutes before it becomes uninhabitable." Rodriguez nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez.
Oh.
Jump to hyperspace on my mark. Course set for Earth Sector 7. We're going home, people." We did it. The last human ship disappeared into hyperspace just as Zelthia's surface began to boil away under the UHE. Expanding star, where once there had been cities and farms and 40 million lives, now there was only fire and death. But the lives were safe, carried away to a new future among the stars. Ambassador Velfor stood in the Liberty's observation deck, watching hyperspace flow past the windows. Beside him, Admiral Rodriguez looked tired but satisfied. Behind them, the ship hummed with the voices of 10,000 Cathara refugees beginning new lives. "It is done," Veltar said quietly. "My people are saved. But I still do not understand why you did this. Your President Stone, your Admiral Rodriguez, your Captain Morrison, who first heard our call. What drives humans to risk everything for strangers?" Rodriguez thought for a moment before answering. "Ambassador, there's something you need to understand about humans. We're not the smartest species in the galaxy, or the strongest, or the most advanced. But we have one quality that seems to be rare out here among the stars. We remember what it feels like to be helpless." Helpless? Every human alive today is descended from people who almost went extinct. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. We know what it's like to face the end of everything and have nowhere to run. Maybe that's why we can't just walk away when someone else faces the same thing. The journey to human space took 6 weeks. During that time, something remarkable happened. The Cathora and humans began to work together in ways that surprised everyone. Cathora. Biotechnology merged with human engineering to create new medical treatments. Human agricultural techniques combined with Cathora plant science to develop crops that could grow in space habitats. Dr. Alex Stone spent her time documenting everything. Was amazed by what she was seeing. "Admiral," she reported, "the cultural exchange is incredible. The Cathora children are learning English faster than our computers can translate. And their medical knowledge is centuries ahead of ours in some areas." Meanwhile, news of the rescue had spread across the galaxy. The great civilizations that had refused to help the Cathora were now demanding to know who these humans were, and what gave them the right to interfere in galactic affairs. The Zephyrian Empire sent a formal complaint to Earth, claiming that the humans had violated established protocols for interspecies contact. The Galactic Council issued a statement demanding that Earth explain its actions. The Void Traders were furious that someone had given away 40 million potential customers for free. President Stone's response was broadcast across the galaxy from his office in Washington, D.C. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes, who had spent his career fighting for what he believed was right. "To the powers of the galaxy," he said, looking directly into the camera. "We are the United Earth Government, and we represent the human species. We did not ask your permission to save the Cathora because we do not need your permission to do what is right. We do not recognize your authority to decide who lives and who dies based on economic calculations. The speech continued for 20 minutes, formally announcing humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. Unlike other species that had expanded through conquest or trade dominance, humans had introduced themselves through an act of mercy that the galaxy's greatest powers had declared impossible. "We offer friendship to all who wish it," President Stone concluded, "but we will not apologize for saving lives. If that makes us unwelcome in your galactic community, then perhaps your community needs to examine its values." When the human fleet finally reached Earth space, they were met by the largest celebration in human history. Every space station, every colony world, every orbital habitat prepared to welcome the Kethra refugees. The integration had been planned during the journey home, human and Kethra working together to design new communities. Director Carl Martinez, who had spent 30 years managing colonial settlements, found himself coordinating the largest refugee resettlement in galactic history. "We're not just giving them homes," he explained to the press. "We're building new communities together. Human and Kethra, learning from each other." The first Kethra settlement was established on Luna, humanity's moon. The low gravity was easier on their fragile physiology. The enclosed habitats could be customized for their atmospheric needs. Ambassador Velthor became the liaison between the two species, working with human officials to ensure the integration went smoothly. But it was the children who adapted fastest. Kethra youngsters played alongside human children in the parks of New Geneva Station. They attended the same schools, learned the same lessons, and grew up thinking of each other as neighbors rather than aliens. Within months, it was impossible to imagine the two species living apart. The scientific collaboration was equally remarkable. Dr. Linda Hayes worked with Kethra physicians to develop treatments for diseases that had plagued both species. Engineer Ryan Bell learned Kethra biotechnology and used it to create self-repairing spacecraft hulls. The exchange of knowledge benefited everyone. 6 months after the rescue, Captain Jake Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of humanity's first diplomatic mission to the galactic core worlds. His ship, renamed the EU's Harmony, carried both human and Kethra crew members as they traveled to meet the great civilizations that had once dismissed the Kethra as expendable. Galactic Council meeting was unlike anything in recorded history. For the first time, a species had gained membership not through military conquest or economic power, but through an act of compassion that had saved 40 million lives. Members of the Council, Admiral Morrison said as he stood before representatives, "Of a dozen galactic civilizations, we come not as conquerors or traitors, but as neighbors. We offer our friendship and our assistance to any who need it. We ask only that you remember what we have proven. No life is expendable, no people are beyond saving, and the impossible is just another word for difficult." The Zephyrian ambassador stood to respond. "Admiral Morrison, your species has indeed accomplished something remarkable. But we must ask, what do you expect in return for this rescue? What are your terms for integration of the Kethra into galactic society?" Morrison looked confused. "Terms? Ambassador, we don't have terms. We saved the Kethra because they needed saving. We integrated them into our society because they needed homes. There are no conditions, no payments due, no political obligations. We did it because it was the right thing to do." The chamber fell silent. The concept of acting without expectation of reward was alien to most of the assembled civilizations. They had built their societies on trade, conquest, and calculated advantage. The idea of risking everything for strangers violated their fundamental understanding of how intelligent species behaved. But in the months that followed, something began to change across the galaxy. Other species started asking different questions when faced with crises. The Kethra rescue became a symbol of what was possible when beings chose compassion over calculation. 1 year after the evacuation, Ambassador Velthor stood before the dedication ceremony for New Zelthia, a terraform world jointly developed by human and Kethra engineers. It was more beautiful than the original, with cities that floated above crystalline lakes and forests that sang in the wind. "We pleaded with the stars for salvation," he said to the assembled crowd of humans and Kethra, "and the universe sent us something better than we dared hope for. It sent us friends who taught us that family is not about blood or species, but about choosing to care for each other when times are dark. The galaxy had been changed forever. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they operated by rules that no one had seen before. Rules that said every life had value, every person deserved a chance, and no one should face extinction alone. And across the stars, other voices began to call for help, knowing now that someone would answer.